there, kids! I'm Spaceman Steve, and I'm here to tell you all you need to know about the moon! Which moon, you ask? Well, I think it's that one we're doing today. No, it's that one. Actually, it doesn't really matter. They're all the moon. Now, some scientists have come out in recent years claiming that you can reach the moon simply by holding onto a balloon and just floating up high enough. And yes, that is in fact true, but I'm here to tell you that that is an awful, awful idea. You never want to visit the moon. Now, most people think the moon is uninhabited, but I'm here to tell you no, it is inhabited by a race of man-eating Gila monsters called Smurgs. The Smurgs will eat you. They number in the hundreds of millions, they grow up to 80 feet tall, they are equipped with laser eyes and bazookas on their tails. You do not want to run into a Smurg during mating season because, it will annihilate you at the molecular level. The other thing that we are sure of about the moon, aside from the giant Gila monsters, is that any human being that touches foot on the surface will immediately be turned into candy. Now that might seem kind of fun, kids. Oh boy, I would like to get turned into candy, but unfortunately it is the worst candy imaginable. That's right. It is the fate of every human being that steps foot on the moon will become licorice. Ah, man, I was afraid enough of the Smurgs, but licorice, man, that's just ridiculous. So just stay here on Earth, where the world government's got your back at anything. This has been Spaceman Steve, explaining the wonders of the universe. Spoiler, they're all horrible. To you, the viewers. Now, drink your milk, kids, and remember, the world government is love, the world government is life. You will always... Ah, dang it, the spaceman's on the fritz again. Hey, Bill, get Vegapunk to come down here and work on this thing. We gotta get 5 more of these PSAs done, and this guy's gotta be a cowboy and a farmer by the end of the day. Tekking spaceman tumble! Ow, it's okay, guys, it's okay. I'm wearing a helmet, yes. Moon pies. What a time to be alive. Okay, we're gonna have fun with this one. You know, there are plenty of things in the One Piece world that are very large and round, insert boob joke here, but the moon is the truly largest and roundest and the most mysterious out of all of them. And we're gonna be talking about it today because I love the moon. You wait for it, guys. I know a lot of you are dubious as if the moon is going to play a critical role in One Piece, but I am a firm believer that the moon is gonna be like a game-changing event. It could be the last arc of the series. Picture it. The Straw Hats have arrived at Raftel, they defeated all of the competition, they've achieved the One Piece, they have it in their hands, and then... the moon, Majora's masks right out of the sky, and Eneru's standing on top of it with his legion of automata minions, and he has all the ancient weapons gathered, and he launches an attack against the Blue Sea world. That's what I'm talking about. Alright, well no, I made a video about the moon a while back. It was like in 2000, I think in early 2017. It was one of the first One Piece discussion videos I talked about because I love the moon so much, but it's been like 2 years, so I thought, let's tackle it again. Let's look at some stuff I missed last time, and what mysteries hide amongst your spherical surface? Alright, so let's just start from the beginning. Eneru's Great Space Opera. I think it was the Great Space Operation, but it should have been the Great Space Opera, because that's what it is. Okay, so Eneru was no longer interested in Skypiea. He didn't care about it anymore. You know, he had his little rule there for 6 years as their deity, but he's like, no, I'm gonna go even higher. I don't even care that rubber man beat the crap out of me, and you know, he's bleeding, he's covered in bruises, but it's not that bad, really. So, he heads right toward the freaking moon, and he lands, and, well, it's what you would expect. The moon is honestly kind of boring at first glance. I mean, the topography and the landscape of the moon in One Piece is pretty much the same as ours. It seems to have its own atmosphere, or rather, what's even more interesting, the moon seems to be in the atmosphere of the planet, because you can literally, I wasn't kidding in the intro, yo, it's been shown in the series, not just with Eneru's Maxim, because that thing was not airtight or anything. You know, he was literally on the outside of it in the open air piloting the thing. You could just float up high enough and you could just land on the moon, and we see it with the balloons. The automata just literally picked up a little balloon, and I mean, provided you don't get attacked by a giant bird creature or you get blown off course or a cumulonimbus cloud doesn't electrocute you, if you just float up high enough, you'll whoop eventually land at the moon. So that's a thing. So it's most likely in the atmosphere of the planet, if that's going to be the case. I'm not really sure how that would work, but it does. But anyway, yeah, the moon looks rather boring at first, which I had this funny scene with Eneru arriving there, and he's just like, I have arrived at the fairy of Earth, my kingdom! Well, this was a little bit less impressive than what I thought, you know? So, no, he begins to explore the moon, and it's just a bunch of moon dirt and moon rocks and moon craters, but inside one of those moon craters, he notices there's a ladder, so he's like, okay, so somebody's definitely been living up here, okay? There's some signs of a habitation, right? So he goes down into this crater, and he finds this old beat-up robot called an automata, and it's just sitting there, like, defeated, and Eneru does what Eneru does best. He just electrocutes the crap out of it. Keep in mind, this is something Eneru does a lot. The second upon arriving at the Fairy of Earth, he basically just starts electrocuting everything and anything that enters his field of vision. Whether or not it's moving, whether or not it is a threat, he doesn't care. He's just like, oh, there's something there! Oh, there's something else! Just electrocuting the crap out of it. So, it's a robot, so when Eneru jolted it with 1.21 gigawatts electricity, it powered back up, and it activated, and it turns out the robot has a name, First Lieutenant Spacey. And, it's a little robot that was built on Karakuri Island, which was the same island where the future land of Baltimore is, which is where Frankie was sent, which is Vegapunk's homeland, same place. And, there was a guy by the name of Professor Skumi, which just means moon, that built 4 automata. First Lieutenant Spacey is only one of them. There was also, they were all named after various, like, space phenomena. So there's General Galaxy, there's, like, Colonel Macro, there was another one that's, like, Cosmo or something, and they're all given ranks, like, in the military, right? So, anyway, he created all of those little guys, the automata, and then they're all staying outside on, you know, Karakuri Island, just looking up at the moon one night, and they notice a giant explosion on the moon's surface. And they were eating rice crackers at the time, and Professor Skumi, their creator, choked on his rice crackers, and he died right there. And the automata were so distraught by this, they gave him a funeral, and they all decided, because they have sentience and autonomy, they're aware of themselves, like, they know who they are, you know, like, we are robots, we are Professor Skumi's children, and he died because something scared him on the moon. Well, I guess we have no choice. We have to go to the moon! I'm like, alright! So they all take balloons and they float up to the moon. However, they were defeated by a band of space pirates! Yes! There are space pirates in One Piece! I don't even... Gah! Listen, no, seriously, think about this. Space pirates exist. Alien life exists in One Piece. Do you not see why I'm excited about this place? You think Oda would just leave something like that and just keep it to a cover story and never reference it again? It's like, Oda's gonna introduce the fact there are aliens. Not just regular aliens, there are fox aliens that just also happen to be pirates. They have a spaceship. This is gonna be relevant at some point. I would be rather shocked if it wasn't, you know? Which, by the way, did you guys know that there's actually an anime called Bodacious Space Pirates? Because I didn't know that existed. Minor tangent. I watched an episode of it the other night. I mean, it's nothing amazing. It's nothing like blow your head off awesome, but it's a pretty good anime. And the English VA of Nami plays the main character, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Bodacious Space Pirates. It's a thing that exists. Where do they come from? I mean, we saw a globe of the One Piece world at Ohara. It has multiple satellites. Maybe the space pirates come from another one of those satellites. Kind of like how in our solar system, not a lot of other planets around our, you know, neck of the woods really have habitable zones for life. I mean, Mars might have a long time ago, but all the other planets are basically gas giants like Jupiter and Neptune. They can't support that kind of life. Mercury's too hot. Venus is just a freaking CO2 hellscape. But the moons, the satellites of planets like Europa or Ganymede on Jupiter or Titan on Saturn, they also have capabilities of supporting like liquid water and things. So if we're gonna find life anywhere else in our own solar system, it's gonna be on one of those moons, not on a planet, probably. You know, mostly if it was gonna be on a planet, it would be Mars, but probably more likely to find it on like Europa or Ganymede or even Triton, one of Neptune's moons, is purported to maybe have liquid water. But anyway. So maybe the space pirates come from another one of those moons. Okay, fine, great. So, Eneru, though, he encounters the space pirates because they're starting a mining operation on the moon. They're like starting to like dig under the ground and they're harvesting the moon resources or whatever. And Eneru's mighty pissed by this because he's like, "How dare you deface my virgin fairy verth!" And he starts electrocuting the crap out of all the space pirates and he defeats them. And the other automata are powered up by him and he starts shocking them as well because Eneru really, I don't know what his original end game here was. I don't know what he thought the Fairyverse was. I don't know if he thought like he was going to get there and there was going to be a castle ready to go with a legion of followers. I mean, okay, that's basically what did happen, but I don't know what his original intent was. I think he just wanted to go there because his god complex, you know, his ego swelled up to the point where it's just like, I have to go higher and higher and higher. You know, there might be a point where he's never satiated. Like, he might even get to the moon and it's like, well, this is great, but there has to be something even higher. You know, I'm gonna go to the sun. I will become the master of the sun. Anyway, after achieving his loyal followers, the automata, the 4 ones that were created by Professor Scumi, they're all following him because they're very, oh, our violent savior saved us. He defeated all the space pirates and all that stuff. Well, the space pirates, amidst their digging, managed to unearth a cavern. And they go underneath it, and Eneru's looking around, and underneath the moon's surface is this huge ancient city. But it's also kind of like futuristic because it's wired up with like, it was supposed to be run by electricity, so it wasn't just like a regular like Stone Age settlement. No, this is like a futuristic kind of land that understood how electricity worked and everything like that. So because Eneru has the power of the Goro Goro no Mi, he just, of course, like everything else in this space opera, he just, an ancient city with much ancient, you know, archaeological value. I'm sure we could probably learn much about this place. But first, I'm gonna electrocute it! And so he electrocutes it, but it powers everything back on. There's like a master battery that contains everything, and he charges that thing up, and the city lights up, and everything turns back on. And on the city, which, by the way, the name of that city was also Bricka. So the city on the moon, as well as the Eneru's homeland, which he destroyed before he went to Upper Yard, same name, Bricka. It's also the name of a Viking village. But anyway, after he charges up the whole city, it's discovered that there's an entire legion of automata that look remarkably similar to the automata that were created on Earth. They're also there, and they charge up as well, and they're slightly different. They have wings modeled after the Skypians, and they're a little shorter than the ones created by Professor Scumi, but aside from that, they're the same exact robots. They even have the same bushy mustaches, so whatever. Maybe Scruffy designed them, I don't know. So, Eneru's space opera basically ends with him having control of this huge city, powered up with an endless supply of electricity because of his devil fruit ability, and he has a whole legion of followers, the 4 automata that were created on Earth that hail him as a savior, and the automata that also hail him as a savior because he activated them after being dormant for so long. And the last few scenes of the opera is Eneru looking at the murals in the ancient city, and the murals depict the ancestors of the Skypians, the Brickans, and the Shandorians all living on the moon at one point, but then through a lack of resources, they decided to descend to the Earth. And that leads into where we are right now, with the Skypians living in the White Sea along with the Brickans before they were eliminated by Eneru. There are a few Brickans that survived, like the priests are Brickans, and Eruj is a Brickan as well. So there's a few that survived, but their homeland is wiped out. And then you had the Shandorians, who became the Shandians, that made it all the way to the Blue Sea, and they settled on Jaya, and then they got shot back into the sky 400 years ago by the knock-up stream. So there's a lot of different parts of this. This isn't a simple, like, oh, yeah, the Skypians came from the moon, and then they left the moon, and they settled on the Earth, and that's all the history you need to know about. No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So let's really break this down and to see what really happened with diagrams. Okay, so here we have a diagram of the moon, the White Sea that's around 10,000 meters above sea level, then the White Sea that's 7,000 meters up, and then we have the Blue Sea, and then the island of Jaya. Okay, so at some point a really long time ago, the all of the sky races that lived on the moon, because they're all direct descendants of this moon race, let's call it. The Skypians and the Brickens left the moon and they settled in the sky, while the Shandians or the Shandorians managed to make it all the way to the Blue Sea. Now, why did the Shandorians get separated from the Skypians and Brickens? Because on the mural on the wall, it seems like they were all getting along. It didn't seem like while they were all living on the moon, they like hated each other or anything. They all seemed to be like one of the same people. And they invented the automata to basically serve as, I guess, their servants, and they're the ones that built that city. And I guess they were mining on the moon. Maybe there was limited resources on the moon, so they had enough resources to build the city and get the electricity generating. But maybe after a while, the people on the moon realized, we're not going to have enough resources to power our city any longer. Like, we're going to run out of space oil or whatever they were using to power the place. So it's like, we're gonna, the moon is dead, basically. There's no hope for us living here, so we have to leave. So maybe they went into separate vessels, separate spaceships, have you. They had the Shandorian ship, the Bricken ship, and the Skypian ship, and they all left at the same time, but maybe the Shandorians got knocked off course, or something else happened with their ship, and they ended up way on the bottom, on the Blue Sea, and they ended up settling in Jaya, and then the other two settled in the sky. All right, Now, it's very important to figure out when this happened, and we actually do have at least a rough estimate on when it did, okay, when all of the moon races left. Because when Nico Robin was walking around Upper Yard during the Skypiea arc, she discovered a literal tombstone for the city of Shandora. Shandora was the golden city that existed on Jaya that was founded by the ancestors of the Shandorians, which were the moon race. So are you following me so far? Moon race starts on the moon, Shandorians that dump on Jaya, they ended up finding the city of gold, or I guess they built the city of gold, and then they named that Shandora, and then the city of gold got destroyed at some point, it collapsed, and then you have Nolan meeting Kalgara, and then the knock-up stream occurred, and then knocked the Shandorians back into the sky. It's a loop. It's a little confusing. But Nico Robin finds a tombstone for the actual city, and she mentions that the city of Shandora was prospering 1100 years ago. That was like their golden age, no pun intended. That was like when the city was at its height of power, okay? And then 800 years ago was the time the city fell. Okay, now 800 years ago is, of course, right after the Void Century, so Robin hypothesizes that the city's fall had something to do with the world government's rise to power. Okay, now, let's back this up a little bit, okay? So, 1100 years ago, that's when the City of Gold was prospering. From my own opinion, I'm gonna say that this massive migration of moon people occurred about 1200 years ago. And the reason I'm saying 1200 is because the city of Shandora was prospering 1100 years ago, but it wasn't built yet by the time they arrived, you know, like, so they had to get time to build the city up before they can declare it was prospering. Can you imagine the Shandorians arriving on the Blue Sea after living on the moon for so long? They were probably scared. They were like, oh, this is a completely different world we were in. They landed at Jaya, which at that point was probably not even called Jaya. They might have given it that name. And of course, you also have like an uninhabited land, you know, like Verf. They had probably never even seen that kind of dirt before, right? It's because it's different than on the moon. And so they probably discovered that there was rich deposits of gold on Jaya, and they started to build the City of Gold. And then after about 100 years, they built up the city of Shandora, and they declared, oh, our city is prospering. Another reason I'm giving them about 100 years is because this is very similar to the Aztec seat of power. I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Tenochtitlan. This was the city that was the height of where the Aztecs, you know, had their empire before Cortez showed up, and yeah, you know what happened after that. But the city began its construction in Mexico, I think around the 1320s, and it wasn't until the 1420s where it was like known as the seat of power for the Aztecs, and then about another 100 years later in the 1520s, that's when Cortez showed up and conquered the Aztecs. And of course, there's a lot of like old world cultures that Oda uses as inspiration for the Shandorians, like the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Native Americans. They're all kind of thrown in there to make up the Shandorian culture. So yeah, I'm gonna say they left the moon 1200 years ago, landed at Jaya, found the deposit of gold, started to build the City of Gold, and then 1100 years ago they declared it as, oh, this is our land, this is our empire now, okay? So cool. Okay, now here's the thing though. If it says on the tombstone the City of Gold fell 800 years ago, So they had about 300 years of power, 1100 years ago to 800 years ago. What about the Shandorians that were living on the island when Noland arrived? Because Noland arrived on the island 400 years ago. This is 400 years after the fall of Shandora, but it's still there. And you're right, yes, it still is there, but it's not the seat of power it once was. It's in ruins, and there's probably only like a few dregs of the Shandorian culture that are still living there. It certainly wasn't the same level as it used to be, right? Now, Noland is still blown away by this, you know, because it's also basically El Dorado, the lost city of gold. That's what Shandora is in the One Piece world. It's El Dorado. Which, by the way, fun fact about El Dorado, when the Spanish were coming over and invading, you know, the southern part of the Americas, they basically heard stories about someone that would be like bathing in gold, and so they assumed, oh, there must be a large deposit of gold in the land. And over the centuries, it went from being a person of gold, El Dorado, to being like a city of gold, to being an empire of gold. Like, it kept building as the centuries went. We're eventually going to find that person made of gold, and then a few years later it's that city made of gold, and then a few years later it's the empire made of gold, you know, like this mythical golden land that the Spanish were gonna uncover and bring all of this gold back to Spain. That was like their goal, right? But it never really happened. By the way, what we find out later, and most likely what happened, was there was a tribe in South America way back in the day that just ended up accumulating a lot of gold through trade. Like, over centuries they just accrued a lot of gold, but there was no like one big cachet of it, you know. Like, I guess the Spanish were expecting to find like this just endless mountain of gold. Nothing like that ever happened. I mean, yeah, the rainforest did yield quite a bit of like silver and gold over the years, sure, but like not on the level that they were expecting it to be. They were expecting to literally find like a mountain of silver or a mountain of gold, and it just didn't happen. El Dorado doesn't exist. But it does exist in the One Piece world, right? So Nolan discovers this place, and he's like, whoa, gold, this is awesome. So that's when he goes back to his country in order to get, you know, the king and everybody. I found the city of gold, and they went back to Jaya, but by the time they arrived, the knock-up stream had cut Jaya in half, and the golden section had to be stuck in the sky while the regular section was stuck on the ground, and that's when Nolan was declared as a liar, and he was executed there, and the Shandora now exists in the sky on Upper Yard. So there you go. There is the history of Shandora, which doesn't really involve the moon at all, but it does, so I had to bring it up. Now, as for the moon itself, I love that. Like, do you see? I like this, what Oda's doing. I mean, he's making it complicated. He's making history like actual history, like in our world. History's not usually very simple. It tends to rope around and split off into tangents, and that's what it is in One Piece, so I can't really hate the dude, you know what I mean? Alright, so, yes, but this migration occurred before the Void Century. If anything else, you can be sure of that. Okay, so, that means that I'm assuming there were humans living in the Blue Sea world, before the Void Century. It wasn't like the Skypians populated the entire Earth. It's nothing like that. It was just that they were probably like another species of human that just happened to live on the moon. Oda doesn't really go that far back in the past beyond the Void Century. Like, the Void Century occurred 900 years ago. That's the thing that we're, you know, mostly interested in. We don't really go further back than 1,000 years. It's only been mentioned a few times. Like, the Tree of Knowledge was planted 5,000 years ago. I think they mentioned Alubarna, and the Kingdom of Alabasta was founded 4,000 years ago. Then, of course, we have Shandora, which was 1,100 years ago. We have Zunisha, which has, like, been wandering the sea for a millennium. But beyond those few mentions, we don't really get a lot of stuff talking about that long ago, right? So who knows? Maybe at one point in the story, Oda will drop a line that's like, the origin of all life, you know, 10,000 years ago this happened. Probably not, but he might. Okay. So, this actually lends a little bit of credit to a theory that what the world government did during the Void Century was actually erase, like, a technologically advanced land and replace it with the world we see right now. The world government certainly does not want anybody researching the Void Century. All study of it is banned. All study of the poneglyphs, anything like that is banned. So the question is, what did the world government do that was so bad that they just don't want, they can't let anybody find out about it, because it's like, if anybody finds out about what we did during the Void Century, that'll completely change the public's opinion of the world government. So it's got to be something really, really, really dastardly. And that is a word you don't get to use very often, but you mean it when you do, okay? So a theory is, the world used to be, like, over 1,000 years ago, the world used to be, like, maybe even more technologically advanced than it is right now. And I think there's definitely credit to that belief, considering there was a moon city that was powered by electricity, so they definitely had the understandings of electricity before the Void Century. The potential was definitely there, right? So the world was futuristic, and then all of a sudden, the world government took over, and maybe there was this massive battle or something, and they ended up just wrecking the world, and the world government made it worse off for everybody. But they also kind of rose from the ashes as the survivors, and they started, their own organization, and they had the Tenryubito and everything, and then they're the ones that created the Marines and all that stuff, and just over the centuries, they started slowly removing any fragments of the history that occurred, making sure that no one could ever figure out what they did, okay? And, they're now ruling over a much more technologically inferior land. Now, there are a few lands that are futuristically advanced, like Baltimore, and of course Vegapunk is known as a genius that is 500 years ahead of his time, So I think it's possible that, like, that's the reason why the world government wanted Vegapunk so much, is because he's this genius that just, I don't think Vegapunk, like studied, works of, like, back, like, 1,000 years ago, and he's like, oh, that's what the world is like, and so he discovered this. I think he is just a natural genius that comes along once every few centuries, and the world government saw that, and he's like, oh, okay, so we want to make sure he works for us, so we're the only ones in the entire world that have access to that level of technology, yeah. So I don't think it's that much of a stretch to claim that, hey, the moon people had electricity and a technologically advanced society well over 1,000 years ago, well before the Void Century, so perhaps the Blue Sea world had it too. It's just that the moon people, they ran out of natural resources. That's why they had to leave. But when it came to the Blue Sea dwellers, the world government got involved, and just everything, caused a lot of problems. I'm also assuming the population on the moon was a lot smaller than the population on the Earth, because the Earth is obviously a lot bigger. Maybe a few thousand of the Skypians and the Brickens and the Shandorians' ancestors lived on the moon back in the day, because we only see that one city, but we don't know how big that city is. That city might take up, like, all of the subterranean land of the moon, for all we know. But even with the parts that we have seen in Eneru's Great Space Opera, it's a pretty damn big city, and it has a bunch of places for people to live, and they have all of those automata that they were their servants, and they had, like, robotic assistants and everything. So yeah, I'm assuming there were quite a bit of the moon people back in the day, at least a couple thousand, maybe a few tens of thousands at the minimum. But okay, now, where does this tie into the One Piece world? How is this going to tie back to, like, the Straw Hats maybe visiting the moon? Because I would love that. I would love that, because it's not hard. All they have to do is install a blimp on the Sunny, and they're good, right? Okay. So, there's a lot of things in the One Piece world that are, like, unknown, the location of. Like, we don't know where the last road poneglyph is. We don't know where Pluton is. We don't know where Uranos is. Well, okay, we do know where Pluton is, because Robin read that on the poneglyph at Alabasta. She knows where that one is located. Poseidon is located at Fishman Island, so we're just going to assume Pluton is located on the Blue Sea for now. But what about the last ancient weapon? What about Uranos? And what about the last road poneglyph, okay? Now, I guess I'm not a huge fan of the road poneglyph being on the moon, because it's implied that Roger, he found all 4 road poneglyphs, and that's how he located Raftel. So if the road poneglyph would be anywhere, I would say it's hidden maybe in Shanks's care or something like that. I think it makes more sense for the road poneglyph to be somewhere on the Blue Sea, not on the moon. Unless Roger figured out some way to be like, I have to make sure that last road poneglyph is protected. So, come on, mateys, we're going to the moon now. I don't know, but maybe, but probably not. But Uranos, I definitely do think it should be located on the moon. Uranos is the Greek god of the sky, so boom, there you go right there. You also have, like, a perfect example of you have a weapon that could obliterate the land, which is Pluton. Then you have a weapon that can, take over the sea, which is Poseidon, controlling all of the Sea Kings. And then you have a weapon of the air. So I think that would make sense if we were going with that kind of, like, logic with it. I know there's a little bit of dubiousness there, because Pluton is technically a battleship, and it's on the sea as well. But it's like, hey, Pluton's purpose apparently is to obliterate islands. And the Sea Kings rule the ocean, obviously. They're like sea leviathans. So yeah, the air having an ancient weapon catered around, you know, attacking from above, I think that makes sense. And if you go higher and higher in the One Piece world, beyond the White Sea and the White Sea, all the way up, the highest thing that we know of so far, except for Kizaru, is the moon. So, okay, I'm just gonna roll with that. Now, I don't think the moon is gonna, like I said at the beginning, like transforming and Unicron arrives. Nothing like that. But the ancient city has access to an ancient weapon. Okay, and it's located there. Now, we don't know actually if Robin knows this, because Robin name-dropped Uranos. I don't know if that means that she already found a poneglyph that references its location the same way that she found the poneglyph on Skypiea that referenced Poseidon's location, or the one on Alabasta that references Pluton's location. It's very possible that at some point in her life, Robin stumbled upon another poneglyph, because she's found a few, and the poneglyph, you know, oh, the ancient weapon Uranos is located here. Okay, now Robin, I mean, it's not like she's going around talking about the location of Pluton to the Straw Hats. She knows where it is, or at least what the poneglyph says, but she never brings it up. So even if she does know where Uranos is, I don't think she would just be, you know, bringing it up to the Straw Hats. You know, it's like, oh, by the way, you want to go get this world-destroying super weapon? So she might know, she might not know, but I think it's going to be on the moon, and I think this would be a beautiful way to tie back in Eneru into the plot of One Piece. Okay, now what would it exactly be? Okay, well, we don't exactly know what Pluton looks like, and that's a problem because the only ancient weapon we've seen is not really a weapon in the traditional sense, like an actual built machine. It's a living being. It's Shirahoshi, the mermaid princess. But Pluton is definitely a battleship that is being constructed because they had the blueprints to it. So Uranos could be, you know, one or the other. It could be a living thing, or it could be a machine, or it could be something completely different. It could be a kind of weapon that we've never even seen before in the One Piece world, okay? Now, if it is on the moon, I think at some point, Eneru is going to get tired of living up there. Okay, because Eneru, he seemed like he was happy at the end of his space opera, like, I found my fairy Earth, and he has a charged up city, and he has an army of minions, but I think he's gonna fall into the mire of, like, the king with an army, but no one to invade. Kind of like Baragon in Bleach. You know, Baragon ruled over all of Hueco Mundo, he had this huge army of hollows to do whatever he wanted with, but there was no enemy to fight. There was no kingdoms for him to invade. He just had a castle and an army, and he spent day after day just sitting there like, I think that's what eventually Eneru is going to get to. Eneru's going to get to the point where he's like, man, I shouldn't have electrocuted all of those space pirates the first day I got here. This place is actually kind of dull. I mean, I have a city. It's a pretty cool city. I have this legion of followers. They'll do anything I say. That's kind of cool. I have all these I have this ancient weapon. I think Eneru's going to get to the point where he's like, you know what? Screw it. I have all of the resources. I'm going to go back down and I'm going to rule over the earth. Maybe Eneru might spin it to a direction where it's like, well, I was meant to go to Fairy Earth so I could locate the weapon to take over all of the Earth. You know, maybe that was his intent. Like, because the Fairy Earth, the moon is smaller than the Earth, right? You do understand this. And you understand that there would be way more Verth, or dirt, on Earth. Just roll with it. This is getting into, like, Sesame Street really quick. But you understand, like, there's way more dirt on the Earth than on the Fairy Earth. Okay? So, like, Eneru might realize this and be like, you know, I have everything I need up here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these resources, travel back to the Earth, using the Maxim, or using maybe if the ancient weapon can fly or whatever. Maybe he has to learn how to master it, how to pilot it or whatever, and then travel back down to the Earth. It doesn't take very long to just float right back down, and then he starts wiping out the Sky Islands first, and then he wipes out the White Sea first, and then he arrives at the Earth, and he's like, time to take over the land, and he's riding out of the sky on Uranos, and it's just this massive, like, I don't know, laser weapon straight out of, like, you know, some sci-fi anime, just pew, 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 pew. But yeah, I think Eneru would be much happier, you know, trying to take over the Earth, because that would at least give him something to do. Because the whole point that Eneru was getting bored when he was god of Skypiea. You know, he was just, like, laying around all day, and he eventually got sick of it, and he's just like, I'm going to the Fairy Earth. And so he's like, oh yes, the fairy of Earth will satiate my desire, that emptiness I feel inside, that boredom. So he went all the way up there, but, you know, I think spending because he's been up there for 2 years now. He went there right after Luffy and his fight, so he's been up there for 2 years. I think he's probably getting mighty bored of the moon at this point, and he's like just going to amass his powers together and attack the Earth. And then he's like, okay, at least that way, you know, if I take over the Earth, I can at least have, like, you know, the entire world under my command, and all of these different kingdoms to rule over, and all of these different people to be my subjects. It would at least be better than living on, you know, the fairy of Earth, which doesn't really have much of anything. Now, of course, the moon also has significance in other parts of One Piece. The most notable one is the minks, of course. The minks have to stare at the full moon in order to initiate their Sulong transformation. I don't think that has anything to do with Eneru or the city or the ancient weapons or anything, but it's just important to mention. Also, the fact, like I said, there's more than one moon orbiting the One Piece planets, so we still don't know the name of the planet, so just call it Earth or the One Piece world, whichever. And so that would mean there's probably more full moons a month than just the one full moon we get every month, so yeah, there's that situation there. You know, I know it might be unbelievable for the Straw Hats to go to the moon at some point, but I think it definitely has to be referenced. So either it has to be Eneru coming back down to the Earth, or the Straw Hats heading up there. If I was going to pick one of the two, as much as I do love the idea of the Straw Hats, like the One Piece becoming like a space opera, I think it would be probably better for Eneru to come back down to Earth. That would be better. And then he could bring all of the technology and stuff he learned from the moon. Now, he wouldn't share this information willingly. It's not like he would come back down and be like, oh, hello, the Straw Hat Pirates, people that I hate. Allow me to tell you all of this information I found on the moon. No, he might bring down, maybe the city itself is capable of transforming into a ship, or Uranos, this ancient weapon. Like, the ship itself travels down into, you know, the Blue Sea world. And maybe Eneru gets defeated, and then Robin can just walk around and discover the city and be like, holy crap, this changes everything. You know, this is like the true history before the Void Century even, like how human beings came to exist on the world. It's all here. You know, the existence of the Void Century and the world government and all these different races, like the giants and everything, because we are kind of getting a little bit into Greek mythology with this. You know, like Uranos, of course, being Greek, but also you have you have the giants living there, and you also have like all these just really weird like species and all that stuff. I think that can, you know, single back to Greek mythology. Fun fact, by the way, Uranos was also the son and the husband of Gaia. So you explained to me how that works, but also they created the Titans, which you might have heard of, and the Furies and everything like that. So because Uranos is like the father god, or god's not really the right term because he's even above the gods and the Titans of the Greek pantheon. Like, he's Uranos and Gaia, they're like the big bosses, right? They do apparently also have creators, but it's a thing with Greek mythology. It's like, you know, before the gods, there was Titans. Before the Titans, there was Gaia and Uranos, or the father of the sky. And then before them, there was also something else. But, you know, before them, it just keeps going back. But, yeah, it could be a thing where everything originated on the moon. It started on the moon, and everyone just descended to the Earth at some point. You know, like the thing with the moon people, that migration that occurred around like 1100, 1200 years ago, that might have been the last dregs of that society. There might have been even a bigger society on the moon that started the human society on the Blue Sea. And then that could have lasted for a few thousand years. And then just 1,000 years ago, the last people on the moon finally decided they ran out of resources and they went down to the planet. Could have been something like that. I don't know what Oda's going with here, but there's a bunch of different ways he could take it, most certainly. And I would be a fan of pretty much anything that involves like this, because it's sci-fi and it's the moon and it's cool, you know? So, Eneru hasn't shown back up in the series yet, but I await the day that our lightning buddy pops back in and tries. He probably hasn't learned his lesson. I don't see Eneru like having a change of heart or anything, because even after discovering everything on the moon, he didn't really seem overwhelmingly impressed. He was just like, all right, well, whatever. I'm here on the moon. Okay, cool. I'm God. That's neat. But he'll pop back in at some point. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know all your moon theories below. I'm gonna go have a moon pie while I sit and stare at the moon. Signing out.